Well, welcome to the Greater Wealth here on Edge Radio Australia. Look at this. We are sitting close because, quite frankly, we've got a lot to talk about. And, geez, it's going to get weird. It's going to get weird. Now, speaking of weird, we'll go straight to our correspondent, the man with the plan on the other side of the planet. Well, not that far away anyway, in Vietnam at the moment. How are you there, Mr. Travis Carter?
I'm going swimmingly well. This is actually I shouldn't say swimmingly well. I've had gastro for the last 2 days. So
seriously, did we really need to open the show with that? Thank you so much for that.
Look, what gets me, he's in a tropical humidity country, full of humidity there, and he's wearing his beanie.
He is.
And I don't know if this is because he's cold or because it's kind of like you're copying Aaron here with his hat. It's a conic thing. What is this, Aaron?
It's paying homage to my grandmother. So as everyone knows, my grandmother is a mad Dockers supporter because they're never going to win. My nana actually knitted this ages ago, this tea cozy, and also because I'm starting to thin. So I'm like, we'll just hide it. Instead of shaving, we'll just cover it.
It becomes the hair relocation program, right? It does, really does. All right. Now, speaking of things that make us run to the loo, it's not just Travis Carter. There's been a lot going on, and I actually want to jump into the show and try and have a bit of a serious talk here. Because
I don't know politics does give you the shits.
See, I was alluding to that. You just said it. There's the difference between you and I.
There's subtlety.
And there's a house brick over there. But there we go.
and about 40 kilos.
All right, now, Derek, where are we going? I do believe we're going to be talking about some Chinese factories, all sorts of goodies going on.
We're going to talk about a lot. I'm going to go from one part of the globe to the next. So we'll go to China, then we'll go to the US, and then we'll go back over to Europe. All right, so let's buckle our seatbelts. China is starting to feel the effects of these US tariffs. They're getting less orders. They're pausing production, and they're looking at new markets. As those impacts of the US tariffs start to creep in, they're losing orders. That's hitting jobs, forcing Chinese exporters to start doing other things, trying to get other customer bases happening. And some companies are already building businesses on other trade routes from China. What they've cleverly done in the US is kind of shut down the backdoor entry into the US, like, all right, we'll move these products from China to, let's say, Australia, and then we'll ship it over from Australia to the United States and say it's from Australia.
Right.
They've shut down those kind of tricks, and this is really starting to hurt. In fact, I was watching during the week, the unemployment rate about 2 years ago was over 20% for Chinese youth. And now it's really hurting because they're coming out of these universities, they can't get jobs, they can't get work.
Well, they're overqualified now, aren't they? Let's face it.
Well, the jobs just aren't there. And now you compound this, they're in a very vulnerable position, not to mention the compounded fact prior to all of these tariffs happening, China was having a big meltdown in its property sector.
Oh, the real estate market
and
was crazy, wasn't it?
The whole Evergrande debacle where they lost billions and billions of dollars on real estate developments. This is really hurting their economy. And you can see how they've gone into conservative type investments over the years, buying gold. But you got to remember, China is very much, its GDP growth is on manufacturing and selling to people who want to buy cheap stuff.
Sure.
And when you've got, the United States with millions upon millions of middle class to high earning incomes buying their stuff, and now they're going, whoa, 149% tariffs. We're rethinking where we're going to bring them in.
Well, the Americans, one thing that the Americans do really, really well is consume. Okay, they are the kings and queens of that length of. Sorry.
They are literally the kings of consumption. The American middle class is responsible for like 30% of the world's consumption.
30%.
Yeah.
Sadly, I'm not even surprised. And obviously, the Chinese are very good at making cheap things, copying things, knock off of just about everything. So this is a seismic sort of shift.
But you got 347 million people in the United States.
Yep. Yeah, it's a fair market. Yeah.
Compare that to 23 to 25 million here in Australia.
Like literally, so 15 people to every one of us in Australia. And a country of physically about very, very similar size.
Yeah. So just to reinforce what Derek was saying earlier about the youth unemployment in China as well, they've stopped reporting on the figures a couple of years ago, but the universities each year they publicise the percentage of students that get a job within the first 12 months of leaving university, and only 55% of university graduates are actually finding employment.
Wow.
So the youth, 55% are finding jobs in the first 12 months. So 45% of all university graduates unemployed.
What you've also seen is
everything else.
Yeah.
Uncertainty in the banking sector has also been a big problem for China as well, with a lot of the big banks buying smaller ones out. But you're getting leaking reports coming out of the Chinese not being able to pull their money out of their bank accounts and this sort of stuff. And so when people can't get access to their funds and they can't feed their families, that's when they start to arc up. And there are rumors, are we going to see another Tiananmen type revolution over there? This is they have got to sort this out very quickly, and sometimes you got to swallow your pride and negotiate. The US is saying the ball's in your court, we're willing to negotiate, but they're a very proud nation, so it's going to be interesting how this plays out.
It's I think the reporting out of China is, you've got to take it with a pinch of salt. So couple of the other things, there's all these real estate agents are just selling houses for 40% of what they were sold for 2 years ago. People are just, they're mass selling the houses. Apparently it used to be, you talk to someone, it's like, oh yeah, my house is worth $9,000 per square meter, blah, blah, blah. Now they're saying, oh, have you sold your house yet? Because everyone's just pulling out of the market because it's just so unstable at the moment. Now, going back to the Tiananmen Square incident, what's happening at the universities, there's a town. So China has this main university city, and there's millions of students there. And so what happens is that 40 kilometers away, there's a town that's famous for their dumplings. So what all the university students have been doing at night, they go hire all the push bikes and they ride down the freeway. And we're talking hundreds of thousands of university students every week. They ride down to this dumpling shop, go buy dumplings, then ride back to shut down the freeway. So they're not doing a protest per se, but they're just being really, really annoying. It got to the point where the CCP are so worried about Tiananmen Square that they've turned around and said, right, you're not hiring bikes after hours. A lot of universities have been given instructions you are not allowed to let the students out after a certain time period. And they're even trying to get this town to stop producing dumplings, so the students can't say, right, we're doing this.
They're not gremlins, okay? You can feed them after midnight. They can have their dumplings. Okay, you've got to give it to them, though, those people who want to demonstrate. And we certainly know through ourselves and what we had to go through with the COVID carry-on, okay, as far as exercising our rights and getting out there and having an exercise. It's good to see that the Chinese, I'm going to assume the youth, but I'm not really sure on that, but certainly coming from universities, it's good to see them actually getting out there and finding a creative way of being heard.
You're assuming they're protesting. That may not be the thing. I mean, young people do young people stuff. I did a lot more creative, crazy stuff than go out for dumplings on a bicycle at the middle of the night. I haven't done that one yet. But
you weren't living under a regime. It's
really the way they're trying not to get the irk of the government is most of them, whilst they're riding down there, they've attached the Chinese Communist Party flags to their bike, and they're singing the national anthem. They've been super annoying, but they're supporting the regime by flying their flag and singing their things, and you see it, they're absolutely pulling the piss as they're doing it. It's hilarious, so it's great. So anyway, I just thought, they're absolutely doing that sort of stuff. So, and it's kind of funny because I forgot to turn my VPN on, so I have just my videos being frozen.
We can still hear you, which is a great thing. It'd be good if we couldn't see you and hear you, but we'll go with what we've got. Only
anyway, so what I'm going to quickly do, I've got to return my VPN on, so I've got to do a full system restart again. So I'll be back in a few seconds. You guys keep talking.
We'll chat in the meantime.
You can play videos. We've got one coming up.
We've got a video coming up. Okay, now I'm going to assume that one.
Not just yet.
No,
we'll get to it. But yeah. All right. So while that is going on, there's been another interesting development going on in terms of, and one of my relatives who is in the real estate market, has been his whole career, is visiting here in Australia. And I caught up with him after 17 years yesterday. And he was telling me there's been a huge slowdown in the US home sales market. And that has been bigger than they expected, dropping to the slowest pace since 2009. And he said it's almost going back to the whole global financial crisis.
Exactly right. You just hit that date.
Panic buyers are bailing. Sales of existing home have slid 5.9% from February in the month of March to an annual rate of 4.02 million. And that's, there's a lot of people in the US, as we just highlighted. That turnover is really needed. And the areas that are really being hit, 5 metro areas, 3 in Florida, 2 in Arizona. He sells in Arizona, funny enough. But he's saying it's not just happening there, it's also happening in other parts of the United States across the country there. They're concerned that they might be getting to a bit of a housing market crash like it did in this current market.
Sure.
But this is a thing, because I think it's more uncertainty at the moment, and people aren't quite knowing.
Just lack of confidence?
Yeah, like investors get nervous when markets are shaky and try to go to safe assets, as they call them, and park their money there. I think this is what it's still fresh in the minds of so many people of what happened in the global financial crisis and that whole thing. You've got to understand that the market's very different now. Those were on selling bad mortgage payments and doing that as a financial product in the game. But if there is a slowdown in the economy, people are going, do I want that bigger loan? Do I want to upsize right now? They go through those kind of mechanical questions. And where is this whole tariff thing going to go to? That's playing, I think, in a lot of the market's mind at the moment.
Oh, no doubt about it. I mean, look, there's a seismic change in the whole US economy. It really is. This is not a little tweaking here and there. America's being seen differently by the rest of the world. And obviously, well, it's actually interesting from that point of view, because, I mean, generally speaking, and I don't want to come across harsh here, but America very much exists in its mind. A lot of Americans kind of exist on their own. They don't think about the worldwide market. So this is an interesting thing from my point of view of, I mean, they are seeing that instability, I guess.
They are. Let's have a look at what J.D. Vance has said recently about the whole housing situation.
Now, Travis, have you got that?
Yeah. Hard pressed to think of a time in my 40 years of life where it's been so hard for normal American citizens to afford a home. Even renting a home has become a challenge, or worse yet, fallen completely out of reach for so many of our families. I was talking with a relative a couple of years ago, and she just made kind of an offhanded observation. As a younger person than I am, she was looking to buy her first home, and just mentioned that when her parents were growing up, they could afford a nice home on a single middle-class income. And she was sort of mentioning this as a sorrowful thing. She was sad that that wasn't true for her generation. And I think all of us in this room, certainly including me, have a little bit more work to do, I think, to make housing more affordable. And I want to talk about that because I think it's the issue where our interests in some ways are most aligned with the people in this room. I read recently that the average income it takes to buy a new house is nearly 2 times the average salary of your typical American family. Not the average American worker, but the combined incomes of a husband and wife, and that's just not acceptable or sustainable in the United States of America. We want Americans to be able to afford the American dream of homeownership, because we know that when people own their homes, it makes them a stakeholder. It makes them a stakeholder in their neighborhoods, in their cities, and ultimately, of course, in this country that all of us love so much.
So what's interesting about this is the median house price for the United States is $403,700 US.
Okay.
Now, that's really fascinating when you compare it to Australia's median house price now of $976,800. Now, of course, Sydney skews that quite a bit with 1.2 million. But if you look at places like we are in Perth, it's now the average Perth price is $1.125 million to buy a home.
Yeah, look, I've got friends trying to buy a home at the moment, and they're not getting a look in. It's crazy. It's just... I saw some figures the other day about the fact that 30 in the mid 90s, effectively a house in Australia was about 2.5 years of your income. Right now, I think that the figure was thrown at me now is it 16 times? That is inconceivable. So the two income household is obviously essential. Otherwise, you're not going to go anywhere. And how bad is this for families? Because that way, your kids are having to be raised at daycare. Disgraceful.
Yeah, and not just that, but is mum and dad going to have to give them a loan when it's time for them to leave the nest?
Yeah,
that's what we've got to consider here too, and it's ridiculous. I mean, look, we always talk about it. I know that it's all controlled. We all know that if they release more land here in Australia, that would release a lot of the prices. It's also been skewed lately with the immigration that's been going on in this country, and needs a breather to kind of catch up with the numbers that have been coming in. But you've got to go, how long is this going to last? Is it sustainable? So interesting times as far as the Australian market is concerned.
Well, what about, with all negative gearing and all of that sort of thing, has over the last sort of 25 years, has just making money out of property as an investment, has that just become so much the priority and not people, not families? Is that?
I think it's a very controlled market. That's where I think the increase, a lot of it has come from, artificially boosted, obviously, by the numbers of 1.5 million immigrants coming over in the last 2 years without the housing infrastructure, and that's what's been the last boost. But I think prior to that, I mean, there's so much control in releasing land in this country because they want them all on the sewerage, they want them all on the system, and they don't want to do that. They want them paying the rates and the council rates, etc. As what I call the Babylonian system. They want them designed there. They don't want freestanding properties out in the middle of nowhere. You look at the estates. We have really modelled from the 80s the estate model of the housing. So you go in, they've got all the beautiful parklands, they reduce your own backyard, and you enjoy this shared space amongst everyone. We'll look after it for you. You don't have to worry about that. And what typically happens is you are actually paying for all of that.
Of course you are.
You don't. It doesn't look like it at face value, but you actually do pay for that. And what's going on in that space is, of course, they're insisting on this beautiful. They've even doubled down recently times. You've got to have a great parkland. You've got to spend $1 million just on the playground for the children to do that. What inevitably happens after, and this just throws the property prices right up there, skyrockets. And look, it looks pretty and all that, but if you had people who had houses further out from the CBD and highways and this sort of stuff, that would drastically reduce the price of housing. But they don't want that with the whole 15-minute city push. Now, if you look at how those estates actually go, after 10, 15 years, you've got families moving in, but they're all empty nesters. So they go through the phase of, the kids. Then you've got all the cars, 7 cars parked outside the front, depending on how many children they've had. They go through that stage. Then they get married, and you've got couples in there who have got these massive houses that they brought the children up, and they're empty now. And so, with an aging population that we've had, they've tried to fix that problem, of course, with immigration and bringing people in. So it's a real interesting sort of dichotomy in terms of managing, what kind of houses do we need in Australia? Do we need to revisit that, rethink it? It's interesting. Bustleton is a really interesting case study as far as real estate's concerned right now. That used to be the Sleepy Hollow where they kept the Christmas lights on up all year long and never brought them down for Christmas time after Christmas time. I don't know if you ever went down.
No,
I've grown up going there since the 70s, right? So it was the real Sleepy Hollow. But what they've done is they brought in an international airport in the last few years. And now people can go there, and it's not just on holidays, it's the FIFO experience of flying in, flying out. Now, there's part of me that doesn't like that because now Bustleton is not the Sleepy Hollow tourist resort you used to go to anymore. But it's become very metropolitan. They've got so much development going on the foreshore. And I've always said, why is always the emphasis on Perth? We've got to look at developing things. So you can fly now from Bustleton to Melbourne and Sydney direct.
Yes, right? I know.
Whereas you can do that, and they're going to roll that out to Singapore now.
Are they really?
I'm going, look, this is kind of the model they've had in the United States where, look at California, you got San Francisco, Los Angeles, all these regionals, big cities that are international airports, international access, takes the pressure in terms of the infrastructure off and allows better pricing of homes for
better pricing of homes is the big issue here. I mean, I've literally got friends who are down Bustleton, Bunbury Way, who are FIFO. Okay, they're living that lifestyle, and they've actually set themselves up that way. Even a little bit out, maybe Donnybrook, those kind of spots, which aren't that far, so they can transport themselves to the airport and off they go.
And you think about it, like Western Australia is 1/3 of the size, just land size and mass alone. We're 1/3 size of the United States. We forget that sometimes. We're one state.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
We're 1/3 of the United States, so it's not like we're short of land.
No. Travis, your thoughts there?
I was trying to stay quiet on a few things. First of all, let's jump back onto negative gearing. Negative gearing everyone blows it out of the water. I think negative gearing has received the short end of the stick when it comes to housing affordability. It wasn't negative gearing that blew the cost of housing out of the water. It was the first homeowners grant. It was a great idea during the 2008 where everyone needed help to get into houses. We need to stimulate the economy. We just took it way too far. You chuck any subsidies like that upfront money into it, or building developers don't do is like, oh, $10,000, no worries. Instead of being a $300,000 house, it's now a $310,000 house. Right. So you're just giving money to developers. That's just overly inflated the cost of houses, and it's been going on for too long. So first homeowners grant should have been wound back ages ago. The biggest difference, and I'm doing a lot of research in America because we're actually looking to start purchasing some investment properties in America at the moment. So the American market, it's really hard to compare the American market to the Australian market because so much of our population is centered around capital cities. So we've got to have this, if you look purely at the capital cities, there's a massive overpopulation, not compared to things like Havana and like all these other, like, or Vietnam, for example. I think there's like 16 million people in a place the size of Perth in Halong, where we are at the moment. But what happens is you can travel 3 hours from the capital city and still have all the amenities that the capital city has, and that happens every 3 hours through the whole entire country, even through the regional areas. So, like, for example, in New York State, there's a town called Potsdam. Its population is all of 5,000 people. It's a bit of a touristy destination because it's really close to the border between Canada and America. But within an hour and a half, you got Fort Drum with a population of 45,000 people, and you literally have the same facilities at Fort Drum as what you do in Detroit. So it's one of those things where there's amenities all over America. So when people turn around, like, the average house price is like $400,000 in America, whatever it is. So move out an hour and you can buy a house for $20,000.
Is it that stark? The difference is that big?
It is. It's insane. The other thing you got to remember, we build brick and tile houses. 99% of houses in America are timber frame houses. They can build a house in 2 weeks. It's not that expensive to demolish a house and rebuild it again. So especially and a lot of the states have really, really lax building codes. Alaska, they have a loose, I'm going to say, guideline of building regulations. It's not regulated at all. You know when you see all those videos where doors are like on the piss and like they're just doing really weird shit? That's Alaska. Through and through. There's no permits, there's no inspections. It just doesn't matter. You build whatever you want, and that it shows in the value of houses. So the other one is buying your first home, like, to live in, is kind of like a fallacy in Australia now. It just doesn't work unless you've got both yourself and your partner have extremely high-end paying jobs. I'm talking financial planners, high-end accountants, doctors, lawyers, teacher that's been in the industry for a few years. Like, if you want to do that in your 20s, it's not going to happen. So you've got to start looking at alternative incomes to supplement your personal income. So if you are looking down the property line, you have to look at investment properties before you look at your own family home first, because Australia is just set up that way. You can't do it just on your income. You need alternative income streams to assist. It's just impossible.
Yeah, look, I've got 2 friends who have just bought their first home together in their, well, it's frightening, but they're in their early 40s, right? Okay, and they both have high incomes.
I had a look at this place in Camillo. So that was between $750 and $800. I'm not going to say the exact figure because it's actually, well, if you can Google it, it tells you how much we sold it for. The rental on that was $1,100 a week.
No way.
And that was like South Perth. That was an hour out of the city. So because I had the granny flat out the back, there was a combined rental was $1,100 a week. So that's $50,000 a year. Plus, because the council rates were over $3,000 a month. You got so our water consumption was about $40 for every 2 months. I'm with you on that one. But our services was $160 for 2 months. So our service connection fee was nearly triple what our actual consumption was.
Yeah.
So it's gotten to the point where the housing market in Australia isn't for houses for you to live in. You've got to buy 2 or 3 houses before you buy the house that you live in.
Well, that kind of comes back to what my argument before. My point was about the fact that housing's just become more of an investment for those who have got wealth, and they're trying to play the tax and all kind of thing. And I'm not against that, obviously, but I am against it from the point of view that there needs to be better regulation, so that, because fundamentally we all need a roof over our heads, we all need a home where we can raise a family, and I don't think it's unreasonable for an Australian family to want to, and I take your point about being further out and all of that. I get all of that, but it is not unreasonable for an Australian family to want their own home.
Yes, no, absolutely 100% agree with you. It's just the government has gone, it's not the property investors that have done this, they're just buying what's available or what's there to support them as much as they can. The rules and regulations have been set by the government over the last 20, 30 years. This is the situation due to poor policy. So I hate it when people turn around and go, the latest one, they want to try and start forcing retirees out of their home so a family can move in. It's like, no, it's their house. They can do whatever the hell they want with it. So what happens if one of their family members all of a sudden goes through a divorce or something like that, and they need a home and they need to move back in with the family? Like, I know my grandfather and grandmother, so Nana and Pop, there's two of them. They're in a 3-bedroom townhouse. You ask them to downsize to a 1-bedroom room, and Pop will tell you to go get stuffed because Auntie Chris has been over. It's like all the people that have come visit. So Auntie Chris and Uncle Frank have just spent, I think, about 4 or 5 weeks in Australia. They're from Sweden. So, no, come stay with Nana and Pop. Well, so I hated the government getting involved in that.
The Greens right now are proposing pretty much if you have a 4-bedroom house and you're only using one of the bedrooms, that you should be able to let, immigrants use the other 3. I mean, honestly, where does this – it's just – we live in a very, very strange time.
Yeah, the government just needs to get out of everyone's house, out of their bedrooms, out of their full stop, and just start allowing people to do what they need to do. Like the amount of regulations when it comes to subdividing property. So we were originally looking at subdividing, but to do just the subdivision, I think the quote from the lawyer was nearly $60,000 just for the paperwork. That's not including getting the subdivision done and getting the paperwork through the government. That's just to get it ready. So it's getting to the point where it's just, why would you do it? It just doesn't make sense why you do all of this. So.
All right. Well, we're going to change tack here, and we're going to talk about one of our favourite people. Okay, everybody loves a bit of Klaus Schwab. Okay, so let's jump into it. What are your thoughts there, Derek? With his step down,
Itsy bugs. Well, he stepped down from the World Economic Forum, and that's really interesting because why did he do that? Well, a whistleblower has come out and alleged that current and former staff have been doing financial misconduct through the foundation.
I can't imagine that.
Including misuse of World Economic Forum funds and inappropriate treatment of employees. This has come out from the Wall Street Journal, of all things, too. They've reported it. And Hilda Schwab is also accused of using World Economic Forum resources for personal travel. Schwab has strongly denied all the claims, and he's under investigation. Basically, what has come out by this anonymous letter that was sent to the forum's board was basically talking about the forum's governance and workplace culture. They reckon that what was going on, they allege what was going on was that junior employees were withdrawing thousands of dollars from ATMs on his behalf when the actual conferences were on.
Right.
And using the forum funds to pay for private in-room massages at hotels.
Of course.
It was also alleged that his wife, Hilda, a former forum employee, scheduled token forum-funded meetings in order to justify luxury holiday travel at the organization's expense. Basically, they've come out and said, well, I reimbursed any of all of those personal expenses back to the foundation.
Why did it happen in the first place?
Look, and so this has really taken a whole spanner in the works as far as Schwab's involvement with the WEF is concerned. Now, you got to remember, why is this a big deal? Because of the influence that they were having on political leaders around the globe.
And still do to this moment.
And that's why this is a big deal. And not only that, not just political leaders, but business leaders too.
Sure.
And getting them into these think tanks that had a very strong socialist background and push to try to determine the direction of where the globe would go next. What's interesting is who has replaced Schwab, and it's an 80-year-old Austrian-born ex-Nestle CEO, Peter Brabeck-Lethmath, and he's an interesting kind of fella. We've got some footage on him. what's coming to the forefront in all of this is his view on water and the control of water and the management of water. I've got 2 videos lined up for what he has his thoughts on water. We'll have a look at this first one and go from there.
Okay.
Liters per day, but not to fill a pool or wash a car. There is a difference. We must transform the way we think about water. By 2025, 1.8 billion people will be living in regions without enough water. Water scarcity is the greatest challenge we face today. And we need to start recognizing water as a precious resource. Therefore, water should be better managed, should be better valued, and has to be better preserved.
Now, this is an interesting concept. This is what the Australian people have been told for a long time.
Yes.
But what it ignores is how much underground water we actually have. We sit on some of the biggest reserves of underground water.
Oh, no question about that.
And the question becomes then, well, who controls that underground water? Who owns it?
Well, I was just interrupt on that.
Yeah.
Okay, the point what he's just made, I don't disagree. I mean, we should care about water. We should care about the consumption. I do disagree with the fact that, I mean, let's cut the crap. There is absolutely no reason in the world financially, from an engineering point of view, there is no reason why the entire population should not have clean water. Well, that's a farce, right? But, okay, I don't know what this other video is. I'm going to make a bit of a guess about it. So before I make any comment about that, we'll probably watch the video. But Travis, you were going to say something?
Water. I'm going to use the Australian Constitution on this one. The government has no claims to anything that is God-given, which is water. The government has no claim whatsoever on charging for regulating. Even if you have a look at the Water Corp, the way they bill it is they're charging you for supplying the infrastructure and pumping the water to your property. They're not actually charging you for the water itself.
Okay.
So
what about usage though? Why is my water bill, if I water more in one month, higher than the other?
Because they're pumping water, it costs them different amounts over different times of the year. So that's how they got around it. It's for the pumping the water to your premise. So one part of the bill is for supplying and maintaining the infrastructure. The other part is that their cost to pump the water to you. You're not actually buying water.
I don't know if I agree with that.
It's all in the wording of it. It's a load of shit. So I hate the concept of a non-government body or any government body for that matter to turn around and say, oh, yeah, we don't regulate water. No, go away. See, Derek, I tried really hard not to use the F word there. So,
there you go.
I like taxing farmers for having a dam. They're doing all the work. They've put it in. There should be no tax on water that's on your property that you've, like, if you're collecting rainwater from the sky, if you've got, 1 million litres worth of water tanks and you're collecting it off your roof, putting into those water tanks, that is your water to use how you see fit.
Agreed.
So, I'm actually against any form of water regulation in that regards. So,
well, you've preempted. So let's see what he thinks in terms of water regulation.
Well, I was just talking about Australian policies. This is the stuff that the Greens are pushing in Australia now. So anyway, to the video.
Coming up.
Bei uns ein schönes Lied, Wasser braucht das liebe Vieh, Hollerei und Hollerie, wenn Sie sich erinnern können. Also Wasser ist natürlich das wichtigste Rohmaterial, das wir heute noch auf der Welt haben. Es geht darum, ob wir das normale Wasserversorgung der Bevölkerung privatisieren oder nicht.
So, just for the radio listeners, what he's just said is he's talking about should we privatize the water, normal water for the population.
Yep, that's what he's saying.
And there are two different opinions on the.
Und da gibt es zwei verschiedene Anschauungen. Die eine Anschauung,
the one opinion which I think is
extrem würde ich sagen, wird von einigen
is represented by the NGOs.
Von den NGOs vertreten, die darauf pochen, dass Wasser zu einem öffentlichen Recht erklärt wird. Das heißt,
so what he's just said is NGOs are claiming that the water is a public right. So exactly what I just said.
Well, yeah, it is a public right. It's a human right.
Sorry, I'm just taking into account for people who can't see the video and the translations across the bottom.
That's great.
Okay, so yeah, exactly what I said. So anyway, he's calling something that's in our Australian Constitution an extreme opinion. Okay, whatever.
Als Mensch sollten Sie einfach Recht haben, Wasser zu haben. Das ist die eine Extremlösung. Ja? Und die andere, die sagt, Wasser ist ein Lebensmittel, so wie jedes andere Lebensmittel, sollte das einen Marktwert haben.
So the other option is water should be considered a foodstuff and have a market value. So where he's talking about actually selling water as food.
All right, Derek, where do you stand?
Ich persönlich glaube, es ist besser, man gibt einem.
So, and he just said, personally, I think that's the better option. So,
to give a food
do you want to keep playing the video?
Just a little longer.
Yeah.
Lebensmittel einen Wert, sodass wir alle bewusst sind, dass das etwas kostet und dann anschließend versucht, dass man mehr spezifisch für diesen Teil der Bevölkerung, der keinen Zugang zu diesem Wasser hat, dass man dann dort etwas spezifischer eingreift und da gibt es ja verschiedene Möglichkeiten. Also.
Basically saying that.
Well, look. Okay.
Travis, you want to summarize?
Yeah.
Yeah, so pretty much what he said is under the first option, which he considered extreme, his words, not mine, is that everyone has the right to water. So it shouldn't be regulated, blah, blah, blah. It's just water, do what you will with it. The other option is to have it listed as a foodstuff, like a cabbage, an apple, or whatever. So it has a market value and it should be sold to the market. And then for the government to organise to have it sold to all the areas that don't have access to water, aka deserts, whatever. So I'm assuming that's also taken it a step further for irrigation and also development into very, very remote regional areas which don't have the infrastructure for it. So, and he wants a second option.
We've got a very famous pipeline here in Western Australia, okay, that was built a very long time ago to take, obviously, water out to the goldfields because of, the development there.
Well, CY O'Connor.
Absolutely. Famous thing we all learned in primary school here in WA, all about CY O'Connor.
It takes 3 days for water to get to Kalgoorlie.
That's right. My point is, how long ago was that infrastructure put in place? We have tech. This is a very easy thing to achieve. It is a human right to have water. Everybody should have the access to it, to clean drinking water. And for people like, we're talking about, Schwab, we're talking about this guy whose name I can't pronounce, who believes that water is a foodstuff. We're talking about people like Bill Gates, who, wants to build a shield so he can control sunlight. Okay. This is the epitome of evil. You're not seeing human beings as what they are. You're seeing them as, well, basically just a financial source, right? Like, almost pet-like, really.
It's the epitome of the Babylonian system, which is one to control, to rule over you, to cause hardship, the very ruling thing. It's a system that basically we never were meant to live under it. In fact, under its system, it has taxes that tax you and take away your wealth.
Sure.
It also charges interest on loans. That was never the better preferred economy design. We weren't meant to have taxes. We weren't meant to have loans. And God gave us all the resources on the planet to live and sustain life. And now you want to control that and take it away from humanity. Well, we can see which system you're pushing here.
Certainly can. Actually, a little side note, just as I glance over there, I look at his age. He's 80 years old, okay? Now, this is not having a go at older people. But honestly, why are we thinking about putting the future of humanity in the hands of someone who's pretty close to the end of life here? Let's put it this way. He's the temporary successor. Yeah. Okay.
While the board tries to figure out where they're going to go from there. They've got a big legal mess coming up that they're going to have to deal with, right? So they want, of course, probably the most experienced person who's willing to do the job on there. What's interesting, who else is on the forum's board? And I'll just have to get that information for you. But I was having a look at this earlier today, and it's fascinating who's actually sitting on that.
Yeah, I'd be curious.
I'd love to know how much they're getting paid.
Yeah, it's quite interesting that who's making the decisions behind the scenes.
I find it amazing that the mainstream media, how they just cover up. I mean, there's no other way of saying it. They cover up the history of Klaus Schwab. They cover up where he came from. They cover up so many things that the evils of what these people are doing.
So Al Gore is on the board.
Oh, okay.
He's on there.
Is he
Yo-Yo
really?
Ma, yeah. Yo-Yo Ma, a celebrity cellist, she's on there.
Okay.
Business leaders like AXA Group CEO Thomas Burbell and Accenture CEO Julie Sweet, they're on the board. So that's really interesting. Of course, they're really facing a real PR problem as well outside of this, because remember that there was little trust regarding them. Schwab actually came out and said, Klaus Schwab, we're facing big problems in terms of trust. And then if you actually look at the speeches that Trump did at the beginning of this year, and also Milei from Argentina, blew it apart, absolutely blew them to smithereens in terms of the agenda. And you had people on panels saying, Trump's won. Trump's actually what we've been working for all these decades has actually pulled the rug from out. It's not in those words, but that's what they were saying. Trump's won. And this man has survived a bullet, all these lawfare suits. He thinks he's invincible, and he's gone ahead and done all this stuff. The globalists are scrambling, and the actions that Trump's doing with, of course, all the terrorists is just put their whole agenda, the globalist agenda, in an absolute panic.
I don't like socialism or communism in any way, shape or form, but I do want, how do you say this? I really want the general public, I want the population, I want the numbers to literally turn on these people. People have got to actually realise the power that we have as individuals, but certainly as we bring ourselves together. And I don't want to live in any socialist utopia. I love a good free market economy. But these people and the control and the evil that's taking place, I just wish people would stand up to it. We've got an election coming up, it's going on right now, okay? And I see people going and voting for the Greens, and I just think, there's no nice way of saying this, okay? I'll make it sound as nice as I can. Are you all there? Are you mentally impaired? If you are voting for the Greens, right, who are just, quite frankly, such an evil party, you see what's going on with the Labor Party and these agendas, and what they're destroying children, okay? They're cutting children's genitals off. They're doing all sorts of things like that. It's all control, control, control. Well, we have an opportunity to change things. We have the opportunity to make the vote, and people are still thinking, I'll vote for the Greens. I'll vote for a nice teal independent. It's not really, their name doesn't really end with Holmes Accord. It just drives me nutty. It really does.
Another name on there, Lawrence T. Fink. He's the chief executive officer of BlackRock. He's on there.
Okay, of course he is.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Also, the Her Majesty Queen Rania Al Abdallah of the Hashemite Kingdom of Jordan. She's on the board.
Interesting.
Yeah, there's quite a few interesting. AJ Banga, president of the World Bank Group.
Oh, look at Mr. Fink there.
Mm-hmm.
Here we go.
So there you go.
Big names
there's some big names.
But I mean, Al Gore, obviously, the man who has. I mean,
Greta Thunberg.
Sorry?
He's the sponsor of Greta Thunberg.
Yeah. I mean, the first inconvenient truth, that man. They've been, financially and
fails.
Sorry.
All his predictions were a joke.
Every one of them.
And Christine Lagarde's on there too, the president of the European Central Bank. She's on the board. I didn't realize she was on the WEF board.
Wow.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, it's all about control.
You made an interesting point there about the Greens and the upcoming WA election.
Well,
I would like to take this opportunity to make I don't know if it's a bold prediction, but I hope it's a wake-up call for all Australians. I reckon Adam Bandt is going to end up being the Vice Prime Minister or Deputy Prime Minister of Australia.
I sadly agree with you, right? I mean, that's really how it's looking. And I mean, that man is a full-on extremist. He has got, I actually have just posted something, I think yesterday, actually on the Edge Radio Australia Facebook page about his just expenditure over the last 12 months, as far as all of this man who's all about the environment, apparently. Geez, he spends a bit of time in a private jet. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. What a hypocrite. They are literally breaking the fabric of Australian community. It really is in our culture. The Greens are just quite frankly, an evil party. I really just don't understand. Well, I do understand why people vote for them, because they think they're about the environment. They haven't been about the environment. In fact, I'm personally of the belief that they were just conceived as a promotional arm of the Australian Labor Party.
So after now living in Vietnam for about 4 weeks or so, maybe 5 weeks, I hate to say this, I'd rather a communist country that pretends to be democratic, which Vietnam does, than a democratic country that's socialist. Like the way the Australian system is set up, it's insane, it's stupid. It's got the potential not to be retarded, but the way it's run at the moment, the Australian people, and including us, so we're actually about to go do a big trip. It takes about 2.5 hours to get to Hanoi so we can actually vote at the Australian consulate. But there's too many people that are still asleep. They're just going by with what the media tells them to do. They don't vote Labor and Liberals and preferencing the Greens and Nationals. And you just don't get, for the next 4 years, you don't end up with Albanese, with the Greens as the deputy leaders. And it's just going to be an absolute shit show for the next 3 years. And I think Australia needs to suffer for another 3 years really badly. I think housing is going to get to the point where the government has to step in to build the houses, and you won't have private enterprise in housing anymore. You'll have government-controlled housing like they do in Russia, and that's the state of Australia I have to get before people start going, you know what, this is not the Australia I wanted. So that's why we got out.
Yeah, you know what, and you're not the only one. So many people are getting out. People are getting out left, right, and centre. And you watch what the newspapers, like the Kitty Litter Times here in Western Australia, the West Australian, the absolutely blatant propaganda they put out every single day. People believe this stuff. It's just crazy. You see so many things that are going on, very positive things going on in the US, obviously, since Trump's come into power, and they'll spin this the other way. We used to have control of our media in as far as like you weren't allowed to own too many newspapers, too many whatever. That's gone out the window over the last few years. This is the problem. The Australian population are completely controlled by this, and when you double down by having an ABC who is completely corrupt. I mean, the ABC in Australia is. I mean, I've got audio recording of them absolutely lying, right? Okay. But they seem to be above the law. That's the problem. When you've got control of the narrative, that's why what we do, what so many other freedom organisations do as far as the media go, why this is so important. This is why you need to share, and have these conversations. Because we're about to have an election. We're about to lose, okay? I feel unbelievably broken about this. I really do. I'm quite emotional about the fact that I think another 3 years under Albanese and banned, right, is going to destroy this country for good, to the point where I'm actually starting to think like you, Travis, as someone who's absolutely Australian to his back teeth, loves his country. I don't even know if I want to be here anymore. Certainly not after the destruction of what they could possibly do in the next 3 years rather.
Yeah. So Australia's just not Australia anymore. America is more Australia than what Australia is.
Interesting, the conversation we had before going to air today.
Yes, very much so.
I see great hope for Australia. I'm going to be the contrarian here.
Yeah, I
think the truth is going to come out. It may get worse before it gets better, because people sometimes are motivated by pain, and then they decide we've got to do something. And I think, the Australian mindset will be, if you start taking away my economic privileges, which have already happened, right? Let's talk about the price gouging that's going on at the supermarkets and all this sort of stuff, where the control and monopoly is going on. But if Australians can't, this has been the idol of Australians, is materialism. They want their houses.
Yep.
They want their boat, or caravan, whichever they choose, or both. They want their toys. We
love our toys,
right? They want their holiday every year. Now you start taking those three things, and they want to be able to, let their kids have a great education and do some extracurricular activities. You start taking those things away, the comfortable life, and that's when they become uncomfortable. Then they'll start to move and go, hang on a second, what's going on? But it's its idol, and the idol has to come down.
The comfortable life only exists for those who are have household incomes of 200,000 or more. That's the reality of it.
Yeah, that's what it's become.
Sorry, what was that, Travis?
Scott Morrison ran the campaign. Was it Scott Morrison? Labor was going to put impose all these restrictions on the utes, on work utes, and it cost them an election.
Yeah,
So
well,
we've
they're still
already
pushing
seen
it.
Australians. Yeah, so we've already seen the Australians rise up. Like you target the ute, the jet skis, and all that sort of stuff. All they've done is instead of going directly after the cars and trying to push the green agenda, they've gone, okay, let's just make it so expensive they can't afford the utes. So have a look at me. Like I had the finances to be able to buy nearly any car I wanted, like within reason. But yeah, I had a clapped out 95 Toyota Hilux, which was the best car ever created. You know, like we love our shitty diesel guzzling 4-wheel drives. Yeah, it was a pavement princess and she never saw like off-road, but she could if she wanted to. But you know, that Hilux was absolutely gorgeous. But and if they start targeting, like Derek said, the comfortable life, Australians will rise up en masse. But it's not there yet because you can just go to the mines and get your 250,000 a year.
Well, that's the issue. Take you back to the beginning of the show, right? So China's in a lot of economic strife right now. It's got to basically come up with another trading partner. And you cannot replace the US market. You can't replace 347 million people all of a sudden. Oh, we'll go sell to you. It's not going to happen. The flow-on effect for Australians is if China goes through big economic problems, will they start continue to buy our natural resources still? Will they continue to buy our iron ore natural resources? Because if they don't, that's going to have a huge effect on the mining industry.
Of course.
And so this is where Australia is in a roundabout sort of way affected by this, as well as allegiances. So you've got a Trump who's got very, pro-America type mindset. If you're not pro-America, then life could get fairly difficult for you. You don't step in line. So Australia's in a really crosshairs. I was chatting to an old, the old type of Australian, the old Cockney type guy. I was having, the old yarn. I was having a true blue dinky die Aussie last
Love
night.
it. Right.
And he's seen some stuff over his lifespan, 70 years old, 80, getting on to 80. And I was listening to him. I didn't realize how much China is actually controlling of our natural resources in this country. He was telling me that they are taking our natural spring waters and they don't put it on an Australian ship. They put it straight on a Chinese ship to take back to China.
Is that right?
Yep. Okay. They're getting water out of here. All the farmland that they're buying and this sort of stuff, they produce it and put it straight on a ship back to the home country. Of course, we know about the airport back up north of the country. That some are trying to regain control of that. But this is what's going on. And there's a fascinating case study, which Travis, you alluded to earlier today, what's going on in terms of the legal battle against China in the United States. It's the state of Minnesota, I think it is.
Pretty sure it's Minnesota.
Yeah.
Missouri?
Or Missouri.
Sorry.
Missouri. Do you want to dive into that a bit more?
Yeah, so
I've been following that story.
Just by the time, that's all. So the state of Missouri sued China, the government, like the CCP, for the release of COVID. And the way that they actually won, found out evidence that China was stockpiling PPE equipment. And because of that, it caused the price of PPE equipment to fight COVID to go through the roof. So what happened is they turned around and sued them for the damages because they knew it was there. They had an obligation to report it to the world. They knew it had got out, but they didn't do it. So the judge ruled in their favor. And so in Missouri, this is a bit which is really interesting, is they've turned around and gone, and I did a 3-part video series about this before, saying to do the exact same thing, sue China for the damages. When they refuse to show up and you get awarded the win, just start taking all their assets. So in America, because even though the court battle was, and this was a 3 or 4 year long, it was a big court battle. So they don't have, I think it's $260 billion worth of is what the payout is. They don't have it all in Missouri. So they're actually confiscating property, not only in Missouri, but all the other states around America.
Okay. How can they do that? Yeah. But all right. Okay.
Well, they can. It was ruled in their favor. They refused to pay. So just start taking their assets. Anything that's a state-owned enterprise, they can just go, bang, that you're state-owned, we're taking you.
Oh, I love that. I really do. I mean, if they're not going to pay the bill, right, and they've been found guilty of exactly what you've said in a court, then hey, get your cash.
It goes even further, though, like when you start going down, I don't know if you can call this conspiracy theory, because there's a heavy concentration of Chinese-owned land right next to all the military bases around America.
It's interesting.
So they're the ones they're targeting first to get them away from the US military bases. So I still believe Australia should do the same thing. It's already proven that it's come from China. They've proven that they knew about it and they refused to tell everyone. And then when Australia said, let's do an investigation to where it came from, all of a sudden China slapped all these tariffs onto Australia. You know what? Fuck you. Sorry, Derek, but take them to court, rule it in favour, take the Darwin port, take all the massive farmlands, take all our string rules back, and just take the whole entire lot and tell them to get out. And then declare 51st state of America. Then let's see them try and attack us.
Would our politicians do that, though? Our gutless,
of course not,
owned by China politicians. But as I say, most of our politicians...
Yeah, put them up for treason while you're at it.
Yeah. Treason does not get brought up often enough, honestly. It really doesn't. We need to start, getting back to the old days of hanging people from trees, I tend to feel. Never mind. All right.
So the good news is I'm in a country which doesn't have extradition to Australia.
Is that right? Gee, that was planned. Anyway, last thoughts there, Derek.
No wonder you've been so liberal in your commentary today.
Yeah. Oh, dear.
Look, I think pray.
Pray.
You get to a point where you go, there's a lot you can do in terms of setting yourselves up, your family, requesting accountability from your politicians who don't want to be accountable, I've discovered, in the case of my local guy. But, yeah, look, do what you can to the physical, but pray. That's what's going to turn this around. We've got great hopes for this country in the future, and we've just got to keep pushing and believing.
No. It is always great also to have a backup plan. So if you do want to learn how to structure yourself properly to limit the amount of impact that the government can have against you, Derek, sitting right there next to Aaron, does do some amazing courses at blueskyfactory.com.au, and Blue does not have an E in the name. So I used to have a little ticker that I could send across the bottom of the screen, but it's disappeared somewhere because someone's been messing with the StreamYard account. I don't know who that would be, Aaron.
I haven't touched it, so don't even try and play games with me, Sunshine.
By the way, I have to say, Aaron, I'm loving that blue hat. It's not a teal political hat just in front of you there. What is it?
Our fishing one. It's about fishing.
Yeah, the blue hat. It's a new one.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when are those shows coming out, Aaron?
The ones about fishing?
The ones that you just recorded?
Yes, those ones. They're not actually coming out. They have been done privately, so they will be available. Yeah. Well, hey, look, people got to respect their privacy. Those videos that we're doing, and which is wonderful mental health stuff, they will be coming out actually over the next few weeks. So yeah, look out for that one. They'll be on Spotify. They're going to be on the Listener app, all of that sort of thing, and away we go from there. So no, it's very positive. All right. With that, we're getting into the show. Thank you very much for being part of the Greater Wealth in Edge Radio Australia.